This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
They're starting to put up the Big Ten and Pac-12 flags inside the Rose Bowl. These were not up when I first started doing the show today. So now they're popping up all around, and it's bowl season upon us, but it's much more than that. It's much different than that now. Connor O'Gara is with us from Saturday Down South. Connor, it's bowl season, but at the same time, it's something else in college football. And I don't really know how to describe it other than the word chaos. And look, it used to be a little chaotic, coaching carousel, early signing period. The transfer portal has totally changed things, and it's like college coaches now need 30 hours in the day. I don't know how you make this any less chaotic than it is right now.
Yeah, they need 30 hours in a day. I need 30 hours in a day. Look, I think we could all use just a few extra hours. That's all I'm asking for Christmas this year. Yeah, it's bananas, man. Like the amount of turnover and coaching moves that are happening right now. Arkansas obviously dealing with those themselves. It's so difficult to keep track of everything. And I can't imagine, this is what I'm thinking about all week. Early signing period starts Wednesday, right? Can you imagine being a coach and having to monitor your 85 scholarships and how difficult that must be? Like the amount of oh wait a minute, this kid said that he was thinking about transferring and he's going to enter the portal and we still have this scholarship to hand out to this kid and he'd be great to be able to get the last minute. Like I cannot imagine the roster management stress that these coaches are dealing with right now because you don't want to overoffer, you don't want to gray shirt a kid. I mean, this would just be a total headache to be dealing with. But I guess that's why these coaches make the big bucks.
Well, and we've had people text in, I wouldn't say freaking out necessarily, but there's just been a steady stream of Razorback players going into the transfer portal, and there's only 3 that have announced they're going to come to Arkansas. But, I mean, you know that they're going to replenish the roster. Now that you've got the defensive coordinator, Travis Williams, signing on from UCF, I guess I would start to expect, now that defensive players know who it is that they'd be playing for, maybe there'll be a few, I wouldn't say a stream, but maybe in the next couple of weeks you'll start to see more defensive players come in to Arkansas from the transfer portal. But I wonder your thoughts on Travis Williams as the Arkansas DC.
You hit the nail on the head. That will help take care of that. And if you're one of these people that's freaking out about it feels like a one-way street with the transfer portal, remember that guys were just allowed to enter the portal the first week of December. These guys like to be able to go on visits, meet with coaches, do the Zoom call thing. And that's when you're really going to see this kind of go into the two-way street territory. And Arkansas will definitely be able to get their fair share of transfers. But, yeah, bringing in somebody like Travis Williams, I like the move. I think that getting somebody who was very respected in the SEC already with what he did at Auburn, was somebody that was working with Gus Malzahn's staff and was, I think, hired like within 24 hours of him being at UCF. I mean, it was really, really quickly how much like how he was able to kind of get him on board to come to UCF. And it's somebody that obviously has great recruiting ties in the Southeast. So I like that move. I know Arkansas fans were kind of worried about that. Is this guy going to be able to have recruiting chops in the Southeast? I think it was a nice move and something that definitely checks a very important box, given all the questions we're going to have about this Arkansas defense next year, especially without Jalen Catalon, seeing him enter the portal. I understand why Arkansas fans have some angst about this defense right now.
That was going to be my next question was, what if you're the D coordinator coming in here at Arkansas, what is your first move? What are you trying to do what's your first plan of action?
You got to find an alpha somewhere, man. Like, you just watch 3 alphas go out that door with Drew Sanders, Bumper Pool, with Jalen Catalon, albeit for different reasons. But if you can find an alpha in the portal, and that is really difficult on defense, you got to be aggressive in going to get them. And that might not happen even until post-spring. But there have been guys in the past, and we've seen this in the SEC. We saw it at Florida with a guy like John Grenard, who was invaluable on that defense, playing the linebacker position back in 2019, and really took over that group and won ownership of them. I think Arkansas is going to have a position for an opening like that. And that's not to say that they don't have leaders, obviously, but I think you just kind of need that upperclassman who can put everybody in the right place. And that's something that we've seen throughout the Sam Pittman era. And you saw it with Grant Morgan and Hayden Henry and these guys who were, you could count on them to just put guys in those right spots. I think Arkansas still needs that. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to come at the linebacker position, but I think preferably that's obviously where you're going to have a position of, that's the position of need at the moment. But you just got to find that alpha because this defense desperately is going to need one next year.
Yeah, those Razorback defenses are usually good when they have a good safety. You look back to Kanoy Kennedy, Steve Atwater, Ken Hamlin, and Catalon was that guy. I mean, they're usually good when you got a ball hawk back there.
Yeah, and guys, maybe you guys could shed some light on this because I've been trying to figure this out. I know that Catalon had his injury issues and whatnot, and there's maybe a chance that he's going to come back to Arkansas. But, do you find yourselves saying, like, man, what if that guy had just been able to stay out there? Or is this just kind of inevitable because he's a guy who, plays the game like it's still 1995?
Man, I think there might be something to the idea that his size and the way he played had something to do with at least the first injury. But I have a feeling, like, I don't know what happened with the surgery the first time around. I don't know if it was botched or if it was done properly, but it was the same shoulder. I think it was practically the same injury. So that had a feeling of something, either something wasn't right or, my gosh, that kid is just incredibly unlucky. It was the first half of the first game of the season. I don't blame him for one. When you look at like a fresh start is also trying to get away from the emotional wounds that either a person caused you or that you experienced in a certain place. I don't think he's got bad feelings for Arkansas or dislike the coaches he played for, the fan base, or anything like that. I just think he wants to get away from the emotional pain of being a guy that rehabbed more than he played the last 2 years in that stadium.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for that. That's a perfectly valid point. It's like, like when my dad died, like my mom, realized, all right, I don't want to, just keep living in this house. I want to move into a new house. I want to make some new memories. And it's not so much that she just disliked the house. She didn't. It was a great house, but she's like, all right, I'm ready for something new. And, I hope that he's able to stay healthy and on a football field. And I really hope that we're not talking about Jalen Catalon like he's Bob Sanders or something like that, because that's kind of the comp that I've begun to think about with him not being able to stay healthy and knowing how much of a difference maker he is when he can be on the field. But hopefully his best days are ahead.
Bob Sanders, that dude was the real deal. So we got a quarterback coming back. We got this offense that throws it all over the place. Why can't we get any receivers to transfer in here? It seems like there's receivers all over the place. It seems like that should be an easy spot. What's going on there?
They'll get them in. They'll get them in there. Patience is a virtue. It really is. It worked out last year with Hazelwood. I felt like that was really quick. He also was able to enter the portal a full week before you could this year. So that's got to be part of it. He literally announced that he was transferring the day after Lincoln Riley, so that he was going to USC. So, I think it's just the timeline of it. Landers was a late addition. I think you can still find guys at different points, and I think they will get them. I really do. I think especially with KJ coming back, that's so key. KJ and Rocket coming back. If you go to Arkansas, it's going to be a lot of the ground game is going to be the majority of the offense. But at the same time, it's still a really nice position for receivers to be able to go get a diverse route tree, play with a quarterback who's got a lot of experience in the SEC. I think they'll get their guys. It might just take a little bit longer than it did last year.
Guys, you're all talking about legitimate, reasons as to why a player would look at Arkansas and either decide he does or doesn't want to play there. But then there's the money aspect of this. And, Sam Pittman referred to we're not going to buy players. I think that they have the NIL collective. Players do make money by playing at Arkansas, but what he's saying is we're not going to try to entice somebody who's already on someone else's roster to come play for us. But he says there's things that are happening that are not right in his mind, a lot of other coaches' minds. I don't remember the guy's name, but the Washington State head coach basically came out and said coaches are tampering with our players. This is a major reason why players choose to leave a program. I've heard of situations where a player went into the coach's office and said, this amount of money, they might not give it to him. And so he looks somewhere else. I mean, this has become a reality of college football. And it's just not many coaches are just coming out and saying it in so many words. But does Arkansas have to adapt to this? Is this the way you got to build your roster or bring in transfers now?
Yeah, there's a way to do it. There's definitely a way to do it. And, I don't know the exact process behind closed doors, but even if it's as simple as like, hey, you went to high school with this kid, or you went to Elite 11 with this kid, like send him a DM, let him know that we're interested, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's going on. Like Travis Hunter was the number one recruit in America this time last year, and he went to Jackson State. And today he officially announces that he's in the portal. You think that kid waited until he got into the portal to get his first text message from an opposing school? No way. They were probably texting him after his first game at Jackson State. Like, hey man, how's it going? Hey, what position are you thinking about long term? Hey, would love for you to come take a visit sometime. Like, of course that's going on. Tampering is everywhere. There's absolutely no way to enforce it other than having the most extreme penalty possible and making some sort of program a blatant example of it. We talked about it a lot with Jordan Addison when he left after the spring camp had ended. He leaves Pitt. And Pat Narduzzi was like on a warpath. He was like on a warpath to talk to Lincoln Riley about all this. And there's still nothing that he could do. I mean, Pat Narduzzi couldn't show up on Lincoln Riley's doorstep and demand that he comes back to Pitt. Like there's just nothing, and you kind of have to be tampering. It's just going about it in the right way.
Yeah, and then Pitt ends up taking the quarterback from USC, and now they get the quarterback from Boston College, who's from Pittsburgh, and I know he has guys who he knows on the team. I mean, these things work. These things do work both ways. What do you think about Zach Arnett at Mississippi State? Is this really just sort of like a lengthier job interview? I guess most coach hirings are like, wait and see in some cases. But for someone that's never been a head coach, for his first job to be at Mississippi State, and taking over in a tragic situation, it was an obvious and maybe an easy choice rather than doing a national search and a guy that already knows the team and coached well in the defensive end. What'd you make of this?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think Zach Arnett's a great coach. I really think he's one of the best defensive coordinators in the SEC. I've been singing his praises. I love the 3-3-5, what he's been able to do there. I argue that he was Mike Leach's best defensive coordinator that he's ever had. And Mississippi State fans came to love that guy. But at the same time, there is a little bit of that, okay, we can just kind of try this out for 2 years. If it goes horribly, it's not going to cost us a whole lot. He probably bridged the gap, keep some of those guys still in, at Mississippi State as opposed to just this mass exodus with a new coach all of a sudden. And it kind of allows them to keep their foundation in place because they felt all right about where they were at. I mean, they're 8-4. They're able to win the Egg Bowl, and they felt like, okay, we feel like we're building some momentum. We don't need to necessarily rebuild everything that we were doing. Obviously, atypical, tragic circumstances, but Zach Arnett was going to be getting bigger and better opportunities. He had a chance to leave for LSU a couple years ago, didn't do it to be their defensive coordinator, and it was a smart move because ultimately that staff got fired. But he was going to get a bigger and better job, and Mississippi State kind of gave it to him, and now you make a really nice sell to be able to say, hey, offensive coordinator, you got total autonomy on that side of the ball. We'll pay you a really nice salary to be able to do it. And Mississippi State can kind of pick up where it left off, which, not a lot of programs would be able to do when they have to replace a legend like Mike Leach.
Connor, so Amir Torres, I am with Phil in California, and I was doing a few segments with the guys before you came on, and I've long been an admirer of your work. I had a question for you. I kind of wanted just your perspective on Phil and Matt were talking a minute ago about, the ingoing, outgoing at Arkansas. But I think, one thing that I've heard talking to a lot of people just across college football is, oftentimes it's not the star players that you're losing. It's that second, third wave of guys that gives an Alabama depth, that gives what Texas A&M was hoping to build depth. Texas A&M hasn't lost a ton of guys that were high-quality guys, but they lost that next tier. Do you think, like, the world of these superpower teams like Alabama has had in the Nick Saban era, maybe the Urban Meyer Ohio State team, do you think that era is maybe coming to an end just because teams won't be able to keep the depth that they once did?
I think their floor is lower. I do. I still think it's all about talent acquisition, but I think those teams, I think that they can struggle sometimes when they all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, we had a rash of injuries on the defensive side, and we don't just have another 5-star to be able to plug in there. And then that's when you see them kind of plummet, and you realize this isn't as simple as it used to be in terms of the roster management. I think that's why Nick Saban was so vocal against the way that things are being built now with NIL and the promises that are being made to these guys as underclassmen before they've done anything. And I think that's the key point to remember, is that it is so hard to be able to keep those depth guys. And if you're a second stringer at A&M and you're like, hey, I don't really see a path of playing time anytime soon. The guy in my position is, still ahead of me. It doesn't really matter if you're a 4 or a 5-star. You're like, I'm going to go in the portal, get some more money, and have a chance to play and have somebody else tell me that, hey, I can start. So, yeah, I mean, there's something to be said. Depth is so difficult to come by. It really is. And it's become such a fluid process now. And if you're not trying to recruit the portal to be able to get depth, I think you're hurting yourself. But it's really difficult to try and keep those guys on board. I agree with you. There's something to be said for that, but I think it's more about what their floor looks like. I still think Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State are going to be in the best positions to be able to maintain that very high level just because of the talent that they bring in the doors and the guys that they have as their first stringers.
Football is back, and BetOnline remains your number one source for all your football betting needs this season. You'll find the latest odds, matchup info, player news, and game trends. And as your continued source for all sports wagering info, BetOnline features live betting, free contests, live scores, and giveaways all season long. Always the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports and events like MLB, MMA, tennis, boxing, and even golf. Head to betonline.ag to join and receive your 100% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use the promo code BELIEVE to receive your rewards. That's BLEAV. Bet Online, where the game starts.